Hello everyone, welcome to sqadia.com. I'm Hina Khan and today the topic of our lecture is physical abuse and deaths in custody. Being in custody and even being in a police custody can sometimes be harmful for the people, and so it is sometimes it sometimes contains quite harmful physical abuse, but it doesn't come under the law of the country, and one should have the knowledge that even being in custody doesn't mean that the police or the authorities has the right to basically abuse the person who is in custody. So it can be quite sometimes fatal for the persons who are in custody. We are going to discuss them one by one in detail in this lecture. In the first section, we'll be discussing the fatal physical abuse. Now, basically, we have to basically gather the evidence that requires for the fatal physical abuse. So there has to be quite significant evidence regarding this abuse because the injuries can be of the pre-custody time. So we have to have the evidence that basically defines that these abuse is regarding the custody time. Then we move on to the delayed examination. Even after a delayed examination, one can basically calculate the time since the injuries has been there. So one should be quite accurate while calculating this time because it can involve the police authorities. So one has to be quite accurate while calculating this time period. Now in the second section, we'll be discussing the death from the beating. The reasons for the death are quite evident over here, and the features of the injuries are also quite evident over here. And we're also going to discuss a phenomena which is known as the falanga, and we're going to discuss that after beating this phenomena occurs in the people. And so we are going to discuss that, and basically comes under the death in the custody or the injuries that has occurred during the time period of the custody. In the third section, we'll be discussing the deaths from the burns and the suffocation. So the burns are also again quite important. Obviously, we're going to categorize them into the first, second, and third degree, and depending upon their fatal conditions that they can cause, and depending upon the depths that they perform. So it can be a first degree burn only involving the superficial layers of the skin, and then we have the second degree burns, and then the third degree burns involving the bones and the muscles as well. Then in the fourth section, we'll be discussing the deaths from the electrical torture and the injuries. It includes basically the cutting and the stabbing phenomena. The clubbing and the blunt injuries are again very important over here, and the blunt injuries obviously include the black eye phenomena that can be caused due to the punching and the kicking phenomena. And the electrical torture is one of the ways that has been followed by a lot of countries. During custody, the prisoners are subjected to this kind of an electrical torture, and it's quite inhumane, but still it's part of the torture cells, and it can cause a lot of damage, and even fatalities can result after this electrical torture. Then we'll be moving on to the suspension. Suspension basically comprises of the asphyxiating kind of conditions, and that is also included over here. And then shooting, that is basically including the extrajudicial shooting, because sometimes the judicial execution also takes part through the shooting process. But over here, we are only restricting our discussion to the extrajudicial shooting. That is not a part of the torture that is given usually to the people in the prison. Then in the fifth section, we'll be discussing the deaths. We discussed basically the injuries first of all, and obviously these injuries can result in the death of the people. So the death after the oleoresin capsicum exposure. So it's basically the red chili. Its botanical name is the oleoresin capsicum, and exposure to this oleoresin is sometimes quite fatal for the person. Then the traumatic asphyxia and the AM locks, the neck holds, it's basically the postural asphyxia that is going to result in the fatal conditions whenever the neck holds occurs. Basically a band dola or the mugging kind of conditions. These are basically, mugging is basically when the neck is held between the bend of the elbow, and it is basically an asphyxiating condition It is difficult to breathe in such conditions. And then we have the positional asphyxia and the blunt injuries. Positional asphyxia is the asphyxia relating to the position of the person, and then we'll be discussing the blunt injuries and how suicides can also result during the custodial period. So I hope you want to learn more about this physical abuse and deaths in custody. So do watch the other sections to this lecture as well.